Do people? Yes. If do people want to just introduce themselves briefly and say where they are speaking from? I've got Chris. First of all, at the top of my screen, Chris, do you want to carry on? Just. I can't hear you. Your sound isn't on properly.
James, you're still on. You need to mute.
Oh, okay. Did he want me to say my name?
Let's pass on the introductions, shall we? Because it's getting too complicated. So because if people are muting, then so I'm going to start, right?
Correct.
I'm Pete. I'm going to put your picture on, Wayne, so I can at least see you. My name is Peter Horn. I'm in York, Old York, and I've been working on the family history for some time. What my aim in this session is to explain what I think are the main family groupings and how they're interrelated. That's the only thing I can do in the time. We have been working, and then we'll have a common base. I won't maybe making any assumptions about what you know or don't know about the family history, so that there's a sort of level playing field when we finish. Now, we started the work on family history in the 1930s when Robert Horn, the father of the Australian Horns present today, and Stephen, who couldn't make it, was living in Cologne, and he was and meeting people, but his view of reality was hampered. Well, he knew that Isaac Horn branch of our family, which I'll explain later, but he knew some people were on other branches, but he didn't know precisely how they were related. For instance, he met somebody called Carl David Horn, who was in the Wolfhorn branch, but they didn't know that Wolfhorn was related to Isaac Horn, our progenitor. Anyway, you'll see all this more clearly in a minute in the diagrams. Now, let's fast forward 70 years to 2008. Stephen Horn and I myself went to Cologne. We stood on the Oberländer Ufer, which runs next to the Rhine. It's changed its name now, where our houses used to be, 2 houses, one for each side of the family, plus a warehouse, because these Horns were horn dealers. They were, together with another company, with which they merged, the leading horn wholesalers in Europe, I've heard it said. And they were quite wealthy. They had, in just the one house, they had 4 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, it's listed, and a music room with 2 Bechstein grand pianos, and a room for 50, an audience of 50. The young Yehudi Menuhin played in the house, and so on and so forth. So we saw the remains of those buildings, which wasn't much. We went to the archive in Cologne, and there wasn't much there. But subsequent to that, we received 2 files from the archivist, and one was about the Wolfhorn branch, which we thought we couldn't make any head or tail of it initially. It was about a guy called Wolfhorn, who was a butcher in Mülheim, just across the Rhine from Cologne. He ferried some French officers over the Rhine. When they arrived at the one side, the other side, the officer said, "You've just transported the Emperor of the French across the Rhine." If it's true, then he transported Napoleon across the Rhine. Whether or not it's actually true, the fact remains that between the wars, this was a current story in Mulheim, which was reported. Well, whether people are going around Mulheim now saying, oh, there was that guy Wolfhorn who transported Napoleon across the Rhine, I don't know. But anyway, so that was one branch of the family. In fact, they are very clearly related to, because Wolfhorn is a brother of Isaac Horn, our progenitor. I'll show all this on the diagram later. Now, the other thing that the other file we received was about your branch of the Horns, what I call the Walberberg Horns. And it was, I'm moving to the other screen, but I can see Sue now, because Sue Lynn deposited this in the name of your branch, in the name of her mother, Hannah-Laura Horn, and it included, among other things, the story of Hannah-Laura and her escape on the Kinder transport, the story of Ruth Horn and her escape to Israel, and Wayne's family tree. Now, we were baffled by this material, and I managed to make contact after, well, several years later, with Sue and Wayne. Actually, I found Wayne because he said, we're refugees from the hurricane, so we're here at the world famous Carrot Festival. I don't know if you remember that. It was when Wayne was evacuated. And actually, there's a storm here in England today, and it's possible we'll get interrupted. But I just mentioned that because that's how I located him from that story. So there are these two files which were mysteries to us. Now, fast forward again, if you go to today, we've got 200 spreadsheets in the project as a whole, from our point of view. We've got 200 spreadsheets, 250 spreadsheets, and I've written two pieces which you may or may not have received. One is called Into the Boar's Drawers and is about the Horn families in the 20th century. And the other is called In Septimania, which is about the Horn families in the prior centuries. I'll be referring to these as we go along. So I'm now going to start on the slides. So you can see here at the bottom, I'm going to ignore Louis B. Mayer. He's going to have to stay in the ante-room waiting for me. And I'm going to ignore the maps. At the bottom, we have here the Walberg Horns. They're split into 4 spreadsheets for spatial reasons, but they're really one spreadsheet. Then we have the Kuchenheim Horns. I'll explain to you what I mean by that. The Walberg Horns are a subset of the Kuchenheim Horns, according to me. But then we look at the relationship between the Kuchenheim Horns and the Mulheim Horns, the Mulheim Horns being the Cologne Mulheim Horns, who are us. So this is the question, are we related? This is the big conundrum, which I'll try to answer today. And then finally, we have all the families related to us, at least in the first instance. So we have the Mendelssohns, we have the Katzenellenbogen, we have the Oppenheims, and we have a lot of famous families who we think are related to us. So that's the plan of the interactions. Now I move to the Walberg Horns. Now, you may have some detailed points on this, but I would ask you to hold back on that until later or another time, because we can't. It's obviously a sensitive thing, because it's you yourselves who are depicted here. The only thing I'm going to say is what you know already, is that Moise Horn is the progenitor, stonemason and sculptor, 1826 or 8 in Sinzenich, 1914 in Walberg, and Clara Katz, about whom I found out something very interesting 2 days ago. I'll say that later. They had over 9 children, but 9 children who grew up, according to me. This is mainly taken from Wayne's work, and we've checked it, but there may still be errors. Now, the only thing I want to do, because you know this anyway better than me, is to point out that firstly, on part 2, we have here Hannelore horn, and in blue is the reference to Boar's jaws. So if you want to read about the Kindertransport, excuse me, I've got a tremor in my hand, so it's what it. If you want to read about Hannelore's escape, you can do that in Boar's jaws. You may say you know that anyway, but I try at least and put them in social context of the whole of the transport and England as a place of refuge and so on and so forth. On the right here, we have Ruth Horn and her escape, which is also in Boar's jaws. Now, the only thing I want to say apart from that is to go to Exodus, movement of the people. Here, I know that you know this, but I just highlighted this. What were most people were lost, of course, in these families, in the Balberg horns, but the survivors came from Michael Horn, who emigrated in 1884, whose branch mysteriously died out. Wayne can tell you more about that. Wilhelmina Horn and her husband. Wilhelmina came in 1891, and the line is current. And then I've just selected some of the main moves to Louisville and to Indianapolis. It's not intended to be a complete record of all the moves. It's just, then we have in 1939 the move to Manchester of Hannelore. Then we have David's move, which maybe you can correct to tell me what date. I don't actually know exactly what date that is, when he moved to Israel. And we have Ruth's move that we just looked at, which ended in at least in 44. And there's a move of Inge Horn in post 1945. I'm going to ignore the other. So that is just my overview to understand. You know, what surprises me, I didn't really realize, is that the moves to the US were all in the 19th century, basically, which I hadn't fully realized until I did that diagram. Now, moving on to the Kuchenheim horns. Now, I understand you probably here in the Kuchenheim horns, just to situate these two, because I believe you, I say you, by the way, this meeting is for the Valberg horns, and we have a lot of meetings with Australian horns, so this is focused on you. Here we have Moisey Horn again. His father was Koppelhorn, and his father Joyce. You see here, geographically, the move from Kuchenheim to Valberberg. Now, the geography is vital for later on in the story, because all these places, as you may know, are near to Bonn, apart from Valberberg, which is halfway between Bonn in the south and Cologne in the north. So this traces geographically the situation. Now, who are the? I haven't got time to go into all of Valberg, but you notice, for instance, that these are brothers of Moisey Horn, which, as far as I can see, nobody's dealt with these. Now, we've got very exact birth dates for these people, but we haven't got any further details. So that usually, for me, means they went to America. If you've got a load of people where the track is lost in Germany, there are Andreas Horns in America about that date, but I'm not sure which one is really this Andreas Horns. Now, I'm only going to make one point. It's my favorite phrase. I'm only going to make one point about the Kuchenheim horns, and that is, if you look here, why don't we know them, or don't you know them? Because, well, most of them were lost. Now, if you look here, you see ST3, ST5, ST1, and 4 and 2. Now, what does that mean? That we get into the more sinister things. This is Stutthof concentration camp. So in this concentration camp, was the birth of the Jaws Boar's jaws, because I realized for the first time what this all meant. I mean, in this camp are 5 by the way, is the sound okay, Wayne? Okay, I'm sure you would tell me. We have 5 Kuchenheim horns. Well, you know what Kuchenheim horns are, I've just explained it. We've got Wolf horns, you know who Wolf horn is because you know about Napoleon. You don't know who the Dortmund horns are. I still don't fully know who the Dortmund horns are. I've got a family tree which goes back to 1800 for the Dortmund horns, but then peters out. They may not be related to us at all, or they're related in an unknown way. So I'll just point out to you, you've got this eerie situation where you've got all these horns in the concentration camp Stutthof who may not even know each other. The Kuchenheim horns know each other because they're the same family. They may not know each other. Even if they know each other and know their horns, they may not know how they're related. I mean, if like Macbeth's witches, they said, when will we 3 meet again? Well, firstly, they would have said, when will we 11 meet again? And the first answer is never, because they all died, except for Regina, who had a very exciting escape described by her sister, and possibly Ilse. There's a question with Ilse, whether she was ever in the concentration camp in the first place. The record is a bit strange. I tell you that there's another answer to that question is we are meeting today, and I am a Colonel Mühlheim-Horn, which is the Wolf horns of Colonel Mühlheim-Horn. You are Kuchenheim-Horn. So since that meeting or non-meeting in concentration camp, this today, as we speak, is the first meeting of those people. That's the point that struck me this morning. Now,
hold on, Peter, for just 1 second.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. I got a message that one of our group can't see your screen, Peter. Does everybody else see Peter's screen with his spreadsheet? Just sort of nod your head if you see the spreadsheet. James, you don't see it? My goodness, I don't know how to explain that. Susan, do you see it? Just shake your head. Do you see Peter's spreadsheet? And Iris, do you see it? And Seahorn, I forgot your first name. I don't understand why Stephen's not seeing it.
Yes, I can hear it.
Okay, but you see the screen, the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
What, James? You have to unmute yourself. Use that unmute button over in the lower left.
I can see it now.
Okay. I wonder why it isn't being visible to everybody. Huh. All right, I can't answer that technical question. Stephen, I'm taping this, so we'll work with you on it that way. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I have the spreadsheet file open, so I'm following it, but it wasn't clear that everybody could see it. So, okay. That's fine.
All right. Okay. Go ahead, Peter. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's fine. The only additional point I'd make is if you look at this Leopold Horn, you get a different situation. He died in Fairfield, Connecticut in 1974, and he escaped in 1939. Even though his wife and children died in the camp, he presumably went out to prepare them for coming over, and then he could never come over. So, and two of his relatives went to Fairfield. And what I'm saying is these are possible relations who one could maybe contact. I just point that out, but there aren't many of them who survive. So that's all I'm going to say at the moment about the Kuchenheim horns. And I'm going to move. Louis Mayer is going to have to wait to another day. And now I'm moving to what the key question really, are we related? You know, this is what I'm going to try and answer. You see on the bottom of the screen, Guggenheim Horns, Moisey, Abraham Horn. These are the people, same people who are on the other screen at the bottom, at the top of it. Let's leave them there for a moment. If you look to the left, you see Joseph Horn, Colonel Mulheim Horns. He is a progenitor of our family, my family, let's say, because the word "our" is a bit ambiguous. He had a son called Yehuda Joseph Horn, Yehuda Joseph Horn, who had about 9 children. And we know who these children are because Isaac Horn, I've mentioned several times, I belong to the Isaac Horn family. And across here is our friend we know well, Wolf Horn. So what Robert didn't realize, we now know through, not through merit, but through the technology databases, that these are simply brothers. Now, then 2 years ago, we were at this stage. I knew about you, the Guggenheim Horns or the Welbeck Horns. I knew we were in contact with Wayne. We had our progenitor. How did it go further back? That was the question. And are we related? That was the status 2 years ago. What happened with a series of events? First is, I was reading a book about the court Jews of the electoral Cologne district. Now, this stretches from Cologne in the north to Bonn in the south. Technically, it doesn't actually include the city of Cologne. And this gentleman called Levi of Bonn was the court Jew or the representative of the Jews in around 1600 for this region. It's a very interesting book, and I summarize it in my work. What amazed me was that the next court Jew but one was somebody called, or two, was somebody called Moses Horn of Linz. Aha, that was the sort of eureka moment for me. Then the question is, what did Moses Horn, was that relation? You know, you're starting off, Linz am Rhein is immediately opposite Bonn on the other side of the river. There's a map that we can look at another time, which shows that clearly. So it's very in the vicinity of these places like Guggenheim and so on. So you've got geographical proximity indicating some sort of relationship. You've got obviously the name Horn. I then found, we know about Moses Horn of Linz because we know in the book it says he was put in prison because of coinage offences and so on and so forth. The question was, is there any relation between these, your progenitor Moses, my progenitor Joseph, and Moses Horn of Linz? We found a book called The Jews of Linz am Rhein. This had this family tree that I've presented to you here, together with the other Jews of Linz am Rhein, going down from Moshe at the top, Weiss, who was also a court Jew, Moise, and Hertz. The other thing is, the researcher Klaus Schulte, who worked with Wayne, was always convinced that the Jews of Linz am Rhein, the Horns of Linz am Rhein, are related to your Moise, but he said himself, I can't demonstrate that. So that if you look at the dates, Hertz Horn, the son of Moise, it fits in that he could be the father of both my Joseph and your Moise, if in terms of the dates. The key point is this: Joseph was born in Linz. We know that from his son's death certificate. This is a key piece of data. We haven't got the equivalent for your Moises. Now, there was some dispute about which Linz it is. I mean, there's a Linz in Austria where somebody else famous came from, whom we don't mention. But I believe there's no doubt that it's the Linz am Rhein we're talking about. I mean, we can discuss that, but it's fairly clear. So if you bear in mind, this is not modern Los Angeles. If you look at the horns in Linz, you see there aren't many of them. They're not going to be horns who don't know each other on Linz am Rhein because it's too small a place. So the chances are that Herr Moses Horn is either the son of Hirtshorn or the son of another line who are butchers and who also apparently called Horn. You can see that they're probably related because this Marnes here reported as the brother of Weiss, Horn's Moises' father. So they're probably called Horn, whether they're called Horn, and they live with Moise in the same house, partly. So Meyer could theoretically be the father of Joseph. Now, then we come to Moise himself. The problem with Moise, he's a bit of a shadowy figure. I suspect he may not exist. I mean, why I say that, he's got a wife called Sibylla. Joseph Horn's got a wife called Sibylla. Well, I mean, that could be a coincidence or it could not be. They could be the same person, in which case, is the answer to are we related? Yes, Joseph Horn Joseph Horn is the progenitor. Both the Köln-Mühlheim horns and the Kuchenheim horns. The only thing I've been doing a bit of work in the last few days on this. I can't say. I mean, the situation is this. If you look at the geography, let me point out the scenario that I think probably happened. In 1424, the Jews were expelled from Cologne. We know that. And we've got reason to believe, which I can tell you later, it's just too complicated to explain, that the Horns were among those people who were, at least one Horn was among the people who were expelled. They were admitted, some were admitted immediately to Bonn. We know that. They then presumably went from Bonn, I don't know when, to Linz am Rhein, which is very close. Now, obviously, there's a gap of 180 years, which I can't explain, between 1424 and 1598. So I can't explain that gap, but unless this Moshe suddenly turned up from somewhere completely different. I mean, Erpel is very near Linz. This is a leading scenario. They then spread. We know that the settlement in Linz is the oldest settlement in the region, and it then spread to Kuchenheim and other places. We know there are horns in quite a lot of towns in that region, and Klaus Schulte said the oldest one is the one in Linz. So that's the leading scenario. If they spread from Linz am Rhein to the other cities, then most likely your Moses Horn was instead of one went to Mulheim and the other went to Kuchenheim. The one brother went to Mulheim, the other or cousin, the other went to Kuchenheim. That's the best I can do at the moment. The idea that they're not related is probably, to me, almost more fantastic than the idea that they are related because of the geographical proximity, the fact they're called Horn, and so on, and the circumstances. But you may disagree. So I think my answer to the question is Joseph Horn must be related to Moses Horn of Linz because he comes from Linz. And most probably he's related to Moisehorn, who's also related to Moisehorn Linz. That seems to be the overwhelming probability. I would have thought Klaus Schulte would have said the same thing. He didn't know apparently about Joseph Horn and this line. He was looking only for this connection. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that, and I'm moving on. I can answer any questions you've got. We're moving on now to the relationship with other families. Now we're back into ancient history, because we have here the exilarchades, which derives from the exilarchs. I didn't know this until a year ago, so what an exilarch was. Were the rulers of the Jews in Babylon after the Babylonian captivity. They were very prestigious people who were the third-ranked people in the state under various regimes: the Parthian regime, the Sassanid regime, and so on, the Islamic regime, and then even the Carolingians when they moved to Europe. They were used by the Carolingians as a buffer kingdom between themselves and with the Visigoths and Islam in this kingdom of Septimania, after which the whole work is named for reasons which I can explain, but I won't do at the moment. Now, there is strong evidence that this is a family undertaking, and the key name is Harkon, which I'll come back to. Then we are, on the other hand, we've got the patriarchate, who are the rulers of the Jews in Jerusalem, and they, whereas the exarchate came to Europe around 1000 in Spain, these came to Troyes around the same time, and so on. So I'm going to come up. That's the top of this diagram. Now I'm going to the bottom of the diagram, and I'm going to show you how we're related to these people, fantastic as it may sound. Here we have Franz Joseph Horn. He is my grandfather. He came to Birmingham in 1939 to escape the Nazis. Hence, I was born in Birmingham. I still got a house in Birmingham. And his wife was Lena Gretz, who I actually met. So there's a living connection between this, me, us, and the diagram. Now, Lena Gretz claimed to be the relative Heinrich Gretz, historian of the Jews in 13 volumes, one of the most important Jewish historians, if some people the most important of all. Now, she is the granddaughter of Wolf Gretz, and we haven't quite nailed it down, but I'm pretty sure they are first cousins without being able to prove it. Wolf Gretz and Heinrich are first cousins. I described Heinrich Gretz not only his life, but his theories of history in Septimania at great length. Now we're going to move on to the Kornstedts. Now, Adam Gretz, can you all still hear me properly? Shake your head or, nod your head. Sorry, I imagine myself talking. Thank you. Arthur Adam Gretz was her father. He was a rich seller of artificial flowers in Dresden. They had a large villa in Dresden, which is still intact. You can visit it in Dresden because one of our relatives visited it pretty recently, and I'm sure the owners will be glad to show it to you. He died early, but his wife is Hermina Kornstedt. Now, the Kornstedts dynastically are to some extent the key to the whole thing. She was known as a hotel grandmother because she spent so much time playing tennis in hotels. It could be a sexist remark. I'm just reporting what two people independently say that. Her brother was Ludwig Kornstedt. He invented economic journalism in Germany, and maybe more widely, I don't know. He was editor of the Frankfurter Zeitung, then as now the leading, well, a leading, probably wasn't the leading newspaper as it is now, in my opinion. It depends a bit on your political views. Now, he made a classic comment to Robert Horn, our uncle. He said, "I'm proud to be a Corn of that ancient family." Now, what the key question is, what did he mean by this? I've drawn the conclusion after a lot of, the most likely person who is his ancestor is Trihistamos Hakon Katz, rabbi in Hamburg. Now, I can't prove that, and it's only a supposition, and there's various arguments against it, but quite a few for it. Now, if that's the case, he taps into this line of exilarchs we've been talking about, who are Harkons. Now, you may, when I started it, I thought Harkon was just a title, you know, but it's used. My observation of the name Harkon is it's used as, for a period, the Harkons call themselves Harkon, then they call themselves Harkon Cats when they move venue, then they call themselves Cats, then they call themselves Carpelids, then they call themselves Levine, then they call themselves Levin. I'm not saying every Levine is a Harkon Cat, is a Harkon. I'm saying these ones are. I notice there's a Levine with us. So the key point is this: if this is correct, we are connected to all the royal families of Europe, because these people married, you know, Machiar married into the Aldana of Martel, who was the, can't remember the relation of Charles Martel. Hanyana married the daughter of the King of Persia. I mean, it sounds incredible, but what Heinrich Gretz says, I thought there's a lot of hoax material on these websites, so you can't exclude that possibility that people are hoaxing me. The only point I would make is Heinrich Gretz makes the point that these exilarchs were claimed to be related to David. And people believed that. Whether they were really related to David is a matter of faith. And because of that, they wanted the prestige of having the legitimacy of marrying somebody from David. So the Carolingians married into this dynasty and used it as a buffer zone against, well, forget the buffer zone, but they married into this dynasty. Whether that proves it, but I'm just saying that there is stuff about this in Gretz himself. So it's not, but some of the things are crazy, like, so one person has the marrying into the Saxon royal dynasty. Well, I have difficulty believing that. So there could be, there are hoaxes, and I just warn you about that. The only other thing is, if you think that doesn't concern you, I put it to you, you're completely wrong, because you're, as you know, the wife of your patriarch was called Clara Katz. And 2 days ago, I was looking at this again for the first time for a long time, and I see the name of her brother being Harkon Katz. And maybe that doesn't mean anything, but normally that means that he's related. So you would be related to the exilarch line independently of this relatively weak link here, because you'd be related through the Katz to Clara Katz to the exilarchs. Don't ask me whether it's true. I'm just giving you the facts as I understand them. I'm going to move on. I'm only going to go through one further item. How long were we doing for time? 2:41. When did we started at we're on schedule. The Oppenheims. Now, when my father was born, that was not yet in the that was in Cologne, but not in the Oberländer Ufer. They hadn't moved there. He was born in 1908. And Sebastian Horn if you saw the pictures I sent out, which you may or may not have seen, you'll see a man with a fine beard standing on the deck of the Queen Mary in 1947 with his wife and son. That is Sebastian Oppenheim. He, I know, gave my father some pink flowers, I think pink roses, and a white hood or a white jacket on his birth, because I know that because I've got in front of me here the book where Leonie recorded the presents her children got. Not yet in. So he is not only a friend, but a relative. We can prove the relation between Hermann Oppenheim, for instance, and through the Stern sisters to the Kohnstedts and back. You can see the relation going back to the Gretzes and the Horns. Now, the Oppenheims are the most important family in Cologne. They were bankers in the 19th century, the Oppenheim Bank, which was survived till quite recently. And there is a direct line from the shareholders of the Oppenheim Bank to Hermann Oppenheim and to Sebastian Oppenheim. The only thing I'd say is, now we come to the most important person in the whole family, in my eyes, Samuel Oppenheim. He was imperial court Jew. In the realm of action, I imagine there isn't a more important job you can get, imperial court Jew, if you're a Jew. He did, I can't remember the emperor who he served. It wasn't Joseph II, it was his successor. And he kept the balance between the funding of the Turkish wars on the east and the funding of the wars with France in the west. And he was a major player in the development, presumably, of investment banking. His close relation is Jude Zushorn, who was vilified in his lifetime and executed in Stuttgart on the town center, and was vilified by the Nazis in a famous film, Jude Zeus. Also a relation. Now, I am personally of the opinion that Robert Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer, I should say, Julius, is directly on this line as well. I think I can prove it. But what's strange is his biography the biography I read didn't mention this. So maybe I've got the wrong end of the stick, or they didn't do such a thorough job as me. I don't know. But now I just make the point, he is the equivalent of a court Jew. Not only, but he's, as you know, the manager of the Manhattan Project, and quite a similar role to Samuel Oppenheimer, actually. And you notice he was a nuclear scientist, just as the earlier court Jews used their knowledge of metals to help with coinage problems. So he used his knowledge of science with political problems in creating the atom bomb. Of course, you get the idea. He was virtually accused of being a spy, and that applies to a lot of our family. But I can't go into. Now, I'm just going to make one final point, and then I'm not going to talk about the Mendelssohns, because this Mendelssohn was a conductor in Baltimore, is directly on the line of Felix Mendelssohn. He married Elizabeth Meyer, who's directly related to Anna Augusta Horn. There's no doubt about that connection to the Mendelssohn family, and as you know, Moses Mendelssohn even more significant than Felix as a philosopher. Now, the only other person I'm going to mention are the couplets, because Susan, in honor of Susan, because Susan, through the Linds, is related to Andrew Cookhill. And Andrew Cookhill is a Cookler. There was a meeting of the Cooklers in London, which I don't know if he attended, but met some years ago. and the worldwide meeting, as we could have a similar meeting, and they talked about their past. Now, the significance of this is they trace their origins to the patriarchates. So in the patriarchate, we have Rashi, Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist, which I write about at length. I'm not going to talk about Katzenellenburg and King Fernite because it's too complicated. But basically, so if this is my final point, if you look at Ian Jeffrey Levine, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was a historian and he organized this meeting. He is related to patriarchs through Ruth Kalina, his mother, because the name Kalina is a Kukla name. I've looked at that and it relates to the Kuklins and the Kukla. Through his he's called a Levine, and through his father, he's related to the Harkonnen, because as I said before, Levine is a Harkonnen name. I don't say that just theoretically. I've traced his origins up this chain of Harkonnens up to at least here, up to around here. So there is a gap here of a few hundred years. So he unites the patriarchate and the exilarchate. And if you go with the Loeb family, who are still doing their family trees, the exilarchate are the children of one wife of King David, and the patriarchs are the children of another wife of King David. So therefore, this man and us as well maybe unite what has been sundered for 2,000 or 3,000 years between the different branches of David's descendants. And that's the case for the defense. I rest my case.
Wow. You make it clear, but there's still so many questions. It's overwhelming to me to try to comprehend all of this. And maybe if I study it long enough, I'll be able to go through the video that we've got and understand it even better. It seems that there are some places where the validity of the link is in question, but you've done a masterful job of putting all this together. Just amazing. There's one thing that might be able to help us, and that is DNA. I have my DNA out there on Ancestry.com and another place called GEDmatch, and I think a third place out there. Do any of the other of you have your DNA analyzed for genetic analysis? You can unmute yourself, or
I've ordered the kit, but I haven't done it yet.
Iris, I know your line. Susan, I know your line. But none of the
I haven't.
None of the other horns have. None of your line have done it. Is that right, Peter?
As I say, I've ordered the kit. I'm sure Chris hasn't done it. I know that, and I've ordered the kit, but I haven't done the test yet.
Well, I do look forward to when you've done that, and it might be wise for someone in your family other than your brother to do his or hers, as the case would be, because it'll separate the spouses, the parents, and make sure that the link is on the horn side. But I think that would be very helpful. And if we upload it from whatever company you have ordered it from to this one called GEDmatch, GEDmatch, which is more or less international, it would be very helpful to know. Then we'd have the evidence that we're related. I'll stand back now.
We're going to have questions or points or discussions or what, anything you want to say?
Sure. I guess whoever has questions should unmute themselves and ask the question now.
Peter, I just want to say thank you because it's absolutely amazing what you've done. Really, really. Thank you.
I obviously thank you for your support. I know you suddenly prepared the picture, and for Wayne's. I couldn't mention all the support I've got from Wayne in the matter, especially psychological support. So I have to thank you, and we ought to thank. I was thinking it'd be nice to institute a Klaus Schulte Prize because he did so much work on Horn ancestry. That I don't know if we could contact his widow. Have you actually got contact there, Wayne?
I used to be in communication with Dr. Schulte back in the 1980s, and I believe he passed away shortly after that. I did not get to meet him when I was in Germany in 1988, just because it was Easter weekend and it just didn't work out. But his wife would now, from the 1980s, you're talking about quite a long time. For those who don't know the name, Klaus Schulte was a PhD, and he wrote The History of the Jews of the Rhineland, which is an amazing book it's a building block for everything that's come after. And I want to also reiterate what Susan just said, that we're deeply in your debt, Peter, for what you've done. It's going to take me about a year to understand it all, but I'm right behind you. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously there's huge numbers of individual spreadsheets, but I still think it's easier to understand this than look at 200 spreadsheets. Yeah.
Peter, I just want to tell you that the Louis B. Mayer thing is actually a red herring. He wasn't actually connected to the Horns. It was my grandmother, Anna Horn, who was married to Herman Horn. Anna's brother married Louis B. Mayer's sister. And that's the only connection. It's a nice connection, but it doesn't do us any good.
Yeah, but I'm aware of that. I didn't think anything different, but I couldn't, I don't think now we could have it. I couldn't identify either party. I couldn't identify the brother. It was his elder brother, and I couldn't identify the sister because I know who Louis B. Mayer's sisters are supposed to be. I know who they're supposed to have married, but I couldn't find somebody who could be. So I mean that it may seem quite a complicated thing, but that's the sort of relation I'm claiming for these unlikely relations. I say, oh well, they're related. So I'm
my mother's uncle was called Emil Levy, the one that married the sister. If that helps.
Oh yeah, that does help. Anyway, we can, if you have a look at, I don't think now's the right time, but if you have a look at this spreadsheet, Louis B. Mayer and Horn, you see who I think are Louis B. Mayer's sisters, Ida Mayer and Henrietta Mayer. Those are the ones I've got. But which one of them married? Yeah. That's the question. It's quite complicated. And I
don't know.
Yeah. Is there anybody who would know more about that? Yeah, you said, so no. Emil Levy, did you say?
Yeah.
Emil Levy. Well, I can try that name anyway. That's the starting point. Yeah.
Okay.
But that is, I mean, a sort of relation, isn't it? So, I mean, you just use these things as excuses to talk about famous people, and
quite right.
And the Jewish, however vague, the Jewish influence on Hollywood is quite an interesting subject. Maybe a hackneyed subject for Americans or whatever, but it's quite. I would have. Anyway, I'll have another look at that and then get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Peter, it's Nick here. I've just got a question. You raised in an email to me just as a kind of a footnote that as far as you know, there weren't any observant Jews in the current well, in the people that you've been in touch with, or as
Yes.
you knew in the current kind of generations. I was just wondering what everyone else thought of that question. I'm certainly my limited knowledge of the family, there's no observant Jews, and in fact, we were brought up. There's a strong Jewish community in Sydney where Mark and Stephen and I were.
You've just
And
frozen.
never saw himself as part of a Jewish community as such, even though there was quite strong Jewish connection, or quite strong Jewish family traditions in other parts.
Before people answer, let me just say one thing. I just
wondered what you
Mark.
thought of that, or what anyone else thought of that in terms of the actual religious connection. Yeah,
just as I reread what your father wrote about our family, and he said that our grandparents, Franz L. Horn and Leni Gretz, as everybody knows who they are now, probably married in a synagogue, but shortly after that baptized their children as Protestants, which sounds, and the interest in the religion had been waning. They were more interested in Brahms and things like music than they were. So that's the only thing I'd say. I don't know if anybody else wants to make a point on that. I mean, you need to know, when we first met, I talked to Sue and she said to me, "Happy New Year." And I thought, I know it's COVID and so on, but I've completely lost reality. It was October, and I thought, and then I realized why she said this. I thought, I had to admit, I've got absolutely no idea. So that was one reason I thought we weren't related, because so presumably, I don't want to maybe sound patronizing, maybe the difference between living in central Cologne and not living in central Cologne is a difference between maintaining one's religion and not maintaining. I don't know. But the fact, well, do you want to say something about your family and the Jewish religion, or does somebody want to say something about that? Wayne, or?
I would imagine that if we go far back in the tree, everyone was fairly religious. Community pressure, small villages, even small cities, would be difficult to break away. Particularly in Germany, there was, with the Enlightenment, there was a move toward Reform Judaism, and that is a different character. But the main holidays are still remembered. And as you and I spoke not long ago, there have been a great number of people who found it expedient or necessary to convert from Judaism to Christianity if they wanted to succeed in the world. When Judaism was considered a religion and the discrimination was religious based, it wasn't until later that it became racial. And it didn't matter what your religion was. If you had Jewish blood, then you were an enemy. So again, to answer your question, I think it's just a question of how far up these graphs we go to find orthodoxy in the Jewish relatives.
In your family, I mean, currently, for instance, you don't mind saying, is everybody of the Jewish religion, or some Christians, or some are very devout, some are Orthodox, some are Reformed, or?
I think we have the full gamut. We have people who are no longer Jewish. We have people who are Orthodox, conservative, and Reform. And probably in 100 years, we'll have another half a dozen variations.
I just point out something I didn't have time. Related to us, according to me, is Judah Loew of Prague, one of the most important rabbis in the history of Judaism. And I read a lot about him, related with the Golem and all that stuff. Then you've got Isaac Luria, the great mystic, and so on and so forth. Moses Mendelssohn, obviously a rationalist philosopher who was also a religious Jew. And then, of course, Felix Mendelssohn, who famously converted to Christianity. So you got them a lot. It's the rabbis I've sort of missed out. There's a whole chain of rabbis, and if you take the Katzenellenbogen family, who it's too complicated to explain, but they a chain, as I said in the piece. Well, I didn't say in the piece. Somebody has spent 30 years studying the Katzenellenbogen, who Neil Rosenstein or something. This is a story current in our family for many years, that one of our family was king of Poland for a night. It's a very interesting story, but I didn't have time to tell it. But these are also religious Jews. So you get the transition from religious Jews, as I said, to professors of sociology, professors of education, professors of economics, and journalists. So you exchange, maybe this is obvious what I'm saying, one type of preaching for another. And I think they tended to be more Reformed Jews, but of course, in some ways, Judah Löw was quite a traditional Jew. So I haven't focused on those, but they're in the family, allegedly. Anybody else?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Myron Weinberg, and on our side, I think we initiated this search, which has ended up incredibly detailed, by the result of my invitation to give a lecture in Bonn, Germany. And at that point, I convinced my father, Sam, to join me, and we would go looking for our ancestors. I have fortuitously, having been a researcher on a new medicine developed by Bayer, Germany, I have fortuitously met the vice president of Bayer, Germany, at a closed conference in the United States to discuss our investigative results with this new medicine. His name was Dr. Jürgen Kubitz, who worked across the Rhine from Cologne in, you know the name of the city, I've forgotten it, where Meyer, Germany is based. And he invited me to bring my father to explore the town of Valberberg and our ancestors. My father, Sam, was the second youngest child of Mina Horn, Wilhelmina Horn. And when Wayne heard about this, he asked if he could join us on this initial search into our background. Wayne is one generation behind me. His mother, Charlotte, was my first cousin. And from that visit to Valberberg, where Dr. Kubitz had archivists prepare a history of the horns in Valberberg to fill up the back end of your incredibly elaborate efforts, we were able to trace backward to the mid-1500s. And that is the material that Wayne had used as his base for exploring our family tree. And you know the rest, you have it all. But what I wanted to say to you is how impressed I am with your incredibly scholarly efforts. This is just beyond our greatest belief. Now, I know there are gaps, and I know that presumptions must be made in genealogy research. But on another note, I'd like to tell you that I read most of your discussion of the religious background of the Horn family and found it incredible how knowledgeable you are regarding the details of the Kabbalah and the individuals who contributed to it. It has always been my belief that the Jews of Germany looked down on the more Eastern relatives who adopted the Hasidic tradition, which centers around the Kabbalah. And you have incorporated that information into your genealogy in such a informed and detailed manner that I want to commend you for it.
Yes, somebody's congratulating you as well. I thank you very much for that, because I didn't really emphasize that I'm interested in more in the historical side than even the genealogical side. But did you mention going back to the mid 1500s, or did I misunderstand you, Myron? Did you mention?
Question? Could you lift your head up? I depend on lip reading.
Yes, sorry.
I'm deaf. And if you lift your head up, I can only see the upper part of your face. Thank you.
Yeah,
what
sorry.
Did you asked me.
You talked about, if I understood you correctly, going back to the mid 1500s. But we've got nothing going back that far for the Horns. Is there some information on that?
Myron, I think we got back about 1720. I don't recall it into the 1500s.
I thought there was something in 1585.
If you think so, it's probably true. I'll try to find it. But I recall 1720, 1700, okay. Something like that.
Well, I thought we'd back further. Anyway, I thought the discussion of the Kabbalah was unique and very detailed.
Yes, thank you for that, because obviously behind my search is what is the relevance. As you know, I'm not a Jew by background, although our family, as I explained, are Jewish. But what's the meaning of all these people for me today? So that's really behind. That's as important to me as the actual genealogy, and that's why there's 200 pages of on Into the Boar's Jaws and 150 pages of In Septimania. So there's quite a lot of philosophical stuff. I'm very glad that somebody's managed to read through that. I'm very grateful for that.
Peter, I think you've done a fantastic job. And in the interests of time, I'm going to try to draw this to a close and perhaps set up a future meeting where we might, the rest of us might have a chance to do our homework more thoroughly and read through the works that you've presented to us. I think it's probably 2:30 in the morning in Australia down there. And I really compliment you for staying awake for this and being with us at this time. If there's anybody has any last minute things to say other than thank you so much to Peter, let's see if we can draw this to a close. I will do my best to have a recording placed in a position where everybody has access and send out emails in that regard. Is that okay with everybody?
Fine.
James, are you still on? James?
Yeah.
No, okay.
I said, yeah.
James is a Persian scholar, and I thought maybe he would have something to add to your very, very detailed background in that part of the world. And finally, I hope you stay not only healthy, but also safe, because I think the Russians are preparing something unpleasant.
Okay, anything else? Anybody else?
Thanks very much, Wayne. It's terrific. And Peter, particularly, it was a wonderful presentation.
Don't thank me, thank Peter. He did everything.
Yeah. Well, thanks for organising this session.
Well,
It's terrific.
I didn't do everything, you know that, Wayne, because I received a lot of support, which unfortunately I haven't been able to express because of shortage of time. But in fact, there's a lot of people have contributed.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. And I'll try to get a video of this available for everyone to do it again. So with that, I will say goodbye and
Shabbat
thank you.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.